Dendro is probably one of the most broken elements in Genshin Impact. It has all of these reactions, and almost all of them are viable in some way besides, I'd say, burning. Hyperbloom and Spread in particular are very popular and powerful elemental reactions to build a team off of. As a result of being a very good element, if you're a Dendro character, you pretty much automatically are at least good. Alhaitham and Nahida are both some of the best Dendro characters, and as a result, some of the best characters in the game, especially Nahida. Even the less used and not as good Dendro characters have their uses. Kaveh is good with Bloom teams because he doesn't take damage from them, Yaya has a reliable healing, and Tighnari is a great Dendro damage dealer and a good spread user. But despite how great Dendro truly is, we haven't gotten a new Dendro character since 3.7. Who was the last Dendro character? It was Kirara. Compared to the rest of the Dendro cast, Kirara is definitely one of the weaker characters in terms of what she offers. She can shield, and that's pretty much it. That's not even unique with the Dendro cast because of Baiju. With this limited moveset, how much can Kirara really do on her own? Why don't we test it by beating Genshin Impact using only Kirara? Here are the rules. I can only use Kirara in battle. Any puzzles that require another element can be completed with another character, no fighting in co-op, and all swords are allowed. This entire challenge was streamed here on YouTube, so the bitrate at some points might be pretty bad, especially for the earlier streams. Now let's see if you can beat Genshin Impact using only Kirara. Originally this challenge wasn't even gonna be Kirara only. It was actually gonna be Neuvillette only, but I realized he's probably way too strong for a solo challenge that I would stream, so I switched to Kirara only because at the time she was my least favorite character and I thought that would make an interesting challenge. Not only to test how good or bad she does on her own, but also a challenge in that I'm using a character I really didn't like. But before the Kirara fans click off, I don't hate her anymore. I think she's alright now. The challenge was started in 4.0, which meant we got a free 10 pull of Prima Gems, which I spent on standard banner.
Watch. Kirara. Watch, we're gonna get Kirara constellation. Watch, right here. Kirara. I don't know, I've never wanted a Kirara. That is a sword. I'll take it.
Sacrificial Sword is a good weapon with its ER boost, but an R1 Sacrificial Sword is very subpar. First we need to do Amber, Kaya, and Lisa's domain, and I started with Amber's domain. I didn't know how to do the skip in the domain at the time, so I used Amber for the Pyro Monument. Next is Lisa's domain, which we could skip by jumping off an invisible platform. Lastly, I did Kaya's domain, which was the simplest of the three. We just beat the easy enemies and jumped over the water. That's the end of Act 1, and now we need to get to AR10 to start Mondstadt Act 2. I usually find this a good time to go over the character that I'm using's pros and cons, so let's go over Kirara's pros and cons. Pros. She's Dendro. Dendro offers a lot of elemental reactions that are quite good, when we can trigger them of course. We won't always get these, but it's really nice to have them when they do crop up from time to time. Her elemental skill has two pros. 1. It gives us a pretty good shield, and 2. It can be used for climbing when you hold it. That's honestly my favorite part about her kit. Her burst has a really high multiplier too, and it doesn't take that much to get it, because her elemental skill gives us quite a bit of particles. Now the cons. She's Dendro. Yes, that's both a pro and a con. Being a Dendro character makes her limited when facing enemies with no element, cryo enemies, and enemies with shields. The only elemental shields that Dendro does well against are Hydro Abyss shields. Dendro absolutely destroys Hydro Abyss mages and Hydro Abyss Herald shields, but for some reason that's not the same with Hydro Fatui shields. That's something I've never understood. One of her biggest problems is her ascension materials. I can't get Amakumo fruit until I reach AR 30 to unlock Inazuma, which means I'll have to be level 20 for a long time. Her boss also seems pretty difficult for her to do on her own, but we'll get into that later when we need to fight it. To get to AR 10 we did the usual Mondstadt exploration and adventure handbook quests. Not too long into grinding, and this happened.
What the fuck? What? I hate this game.
I swear, all of my reroll accounts are cursed with Tighnari's, while my account can't even get a single Tighnari. And I like Tighnari a lot! Doing the 3 barrier world quest in Dadaupa Gorge gets us the rest of the experience we needed to reach AR 10, which gives us a free 10 pull. It's a sword. Lion's Roar is definitely not a bad weapon, but it doesn't really work for Kirara, so we'll stick with Sacrificial Sword. Now Act 2. We meet the Vent, who takes us to Windrise, where we fight an Eye of the Storm. This fight was kind of long and uninteresting, but what was interesting was this. What? Thanks. Later we met Diluc, who takes us to the Fatui hideout. We just stunlocked and launched the agent, who was the only potentially dangerous enemy in this domain. Next we need to get 3 teardrop crystals, and the first one requires us to beat a Ruin Guard for it. This fight was slow because we can't really hit hard with our Dendro attacks yet without a 3 or 4 star Dendro damage bonus artifact. Spoilers, I didn't get one for a really long time. The next one we get by opening a random chest, and the next one was in a domain. I almost died because I wasn't really caring, but I didn't. A problem at this time was that I was being careless because I was never really giving Kirara a good shot. I was just blindly saying that she's a bad character without giving her a fair shot like any of the other characters I've done solo challenges for, which was really annoying. That's Act 2 complete. Now we need to reach AR 18 to start Act 3. At AR 12 we unlock commissions, which are an easy and consistent way to get adventure rank experience. That's where day 1 ended. At the start of day 2 I collected some chests and animoculi and then did a pull on weapon banner. 4 star. The chainsaw, the portable power saw. Cool. I decided to switch to prototype Rancor because without a Dendro damage bonus goblet, the only other thing I could really build off of was physical damage. This is probably the most cursed Kirara build. When we reach AR 15 we can ascend ourselves. Or we would be able to, but our materials are stuck in Inazuma. What I can do though is ascend all my other characters to get the free wish from them.
Weren't we just talking about Dory as well?
There always has to be some sort of Dory cameo in one of my videos. Our build is a little all over the place because it's 2-piece Berserker and 2-piece Instructor with a prototype Rancor and a physical damage bonus goblet. Once again, the most cursed Kirara build. The materials I needed for prototype Rancor were in Liyue, so it's time to go to Liyue. In Liyue I did the World Quest Treasure Lost Treasure Found and didn't even get what I came to Liyue for before going back to Mondstadt to do some story quest. I did Kai's and Lisa's story quest before returning to Liyue for a bit to complete the second part of Treasure Lost, Treasure Found, and the Tree Who Stands Alone, and then did Amber's story quest back in Mondstadt. That gets us to AR 18, so it's time for Act 3. The Hydro Abyss Mage at the entrance to Storm Terror's Lair's shields was taken down really fast because Dendro works well against Hydro Abyss shields, and inside Storm Terror's Lair we fight another Abyss Mage while activating the light actuators. This one was Pyro, which didn't work out nearly as well, but it was still pretty easy. Now time for Dvalin. We almost one-phased Dvalin, but just barely came up short despite being underleveled for it. That's actually quite impressive.
Quickly, they must be finding.
That marks the end of Mondstadt and the end of day 2. Now we need to get to AR 23 to start Liyue Act 1. We unlocked Diluc's and Razor's story quest for completing Mondstadt Act 3, so I did both of those along with Zhangling's story quest to get an easy experience. That's all I did for day 3, and for 3 months after this stream, I didn't touch this account. I finally returned to this account in late January, and that was also the first stream to have my Kokomi icon. After some random exploration in Liyue and doing the World Quest and the Treasure Goes To, I had enough for a 10 pull on standard banner. Kirara constellation? Do I hear a Kirara constellation in the distance? I think I... The way I shut my mouth. Sometime after that I had a revelation, but I can tell it'll definitely get difficult because we can't ascend ourselves. We're stuck at level 20. Wait a second. Wait. You. If you think this shouldn't be allowed, too bad. I allow things like trial runs for solo challenges if I need materials or just to get some Prima Gems. With that being said, I literally could not have come back to this challenge at a better time. Raiden's banner was going on at the time, and she is the only other character in the game that takes Amakuma fruits. Ascending her gives us our first passive talent, which I barely understand, but from what I gathered it basically just means we get more shield. Going to the Virgin Jade Chamber gets us to AR 23, so now we can start Liyue Act 1. Rex Lapis dies, and now we have to tell all the Adepti about his death. Hey girlie. Hold still. First is Mooncarver, who gives us a buff that increases our energy recharge, which makes the fight easy. Next I did Cloud Retainer, who we gave some food to before skipping their domain by jumping off a tree. Next is Mountain Shaper, and we quickly found the guy's brother in Amber, and last is Xiao. The only part in this quest worth talking about is the Ruin Hunter, which was quick and easy. That's the end of Liyue Act 1. Now we need to get to AR-25 to start Act 2. Pretty soon after completing Act 1, I did the Chi of Yor, which I expected to be harder than it actually was. That's where I ended Day 4. At the start of Day 5, I did my commissions and explored Qianshu Valley. That puts us very close to reaching AR-25, so I fought the Wolf of the North to get the rest of the experience I needed. Now I need to do the AR-25 Ascension domain, which is really easy as always. Even despite not being able to ascend ourselves because we can't get any more Amakua fruits until we unlock Inazuma, Kirara is still doing decent damage. I'm still building her off of physical because we still haven't gotten a Dendro damage bonus goblet. I didn't fight the Iniquitous Baptist before the domain because, as I said, I can't ascend myself. Now it's time to start Act 2. We meet Zhongli and then go to Mondstadt to boil some rocks. It just so happened to rain when we fought the Hilly Trolls, so we could use Bloom Rara. Later we had to go inside Granny's teapot, which was filled with slimes. I could use elemental reactions for all of them except for the cryo ones, and for the cryo ones I could use the exploding flowers to get rid of their shields fast. Later in the Archon quest we go to the Guizhong Ballista and fight a bunch of treasure hoarders. No doubt fights are starting to get a little slow, but it's still not that difficult. As I said in Layla only, a shield goes a long way. Kirara's shield isn't the best by any means, but it's still good to have a shield. Later we have a meal with Zhongli, and that's where Act 2 ends. Now we need to get to AR-28 to start Act 3. I decided now it's finally time to give the Iniquitous Baptist a try, but I realized pretty quickly that I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I do think it's possible, but it would take a long time and it would take quite a bit of luck, which I'd rather not sit through. Of the Iniquitous Baptist shields, Kirara can only damage half of them. She shreds through the Hydra one easily, but while she can hurt the Electra one, it doesn't do much. The Baptist is also pretty good at hitting you up close, which is the only way that Kirara can damage the Baptist. I'd honestly rather sit through this game with a level 40 Kirara than wait to get the perfect RNG for this fight multiple times throughout the playthrough. So that's what I'm gonna do. After that I did Xingqiu Story Quest, which is where I ended Day 5. Day 6 was the day I finally explored Dragonspine. It's probably one of the quickest ways to get experience at this point, and it's relatively easy.
What the did the Crimson Gate hit the Bloom?
About 37 minutes into exploring Dragonspine, this happened.
I feel like we can get over our hate for each other, because clearly it's a two-way hate. Oh my god! Why?
I am Kuchin, Yuheng of the Liyue Qixing.
This game is the
We
worst.
live in an
I went to Liyue for a bit to explore Lingzhu Pass and then returned to Dragonspine to raise the Skyfrost Nail.
Oh, wait. I know what's gonna happen here. Get back up. I'm gonna die.
That finished the Dragonspine quest, which gives us just enough experience to start Act 3. We trigger the Animo mechanism in the mountains with the other cat girl, and then fight the Millet at the Guizhong Ballista. I thought this would go just as slow as the Treasure Hoarders did, but it was surprisingly fast.
Cat moans to awaken the glazed donuts. Okay.
Later we had to fight the 3 Whopper Flowers who we tried to drown, but for some reason they wouldn't get launched, so we had to beat them normally. Soon after that we had to fight Ed Sheeran. The thing about most solo challenges is that there will be very few bosses that pose any sort of danger. What's usually the problem is groups of enemies that are hard to deal with or tanky enemies. With that being said, this boss was really easy. What's more important is around this time we developed an in-universe reason why Kirara is traveling across Teyvat, to deliver a hoodie Nivelette ordered.
This is what Nivelette ordered.
After that we have to fight Osio. Because of the rain we could once again use Bloom Rara, which destroyed everybody. That's the end of Liyue Act 3. Now we need to complete AR-30 and complete both Dainslift quests, but I'll leave that for Day 7. Most Abyss enemies in the Dainslift World quests are either Pyro or Hydro Abyss mages. Pyro Abyss mages are not fast to take down, but they're not that bad, and Hydro Abyss mages are absolutely destroyed.
Just don't make them
It's also definitely worth mentioning that this was the stream where I started to think that Kirara is not that bad. We call that character development. Next was We Will Be Reunited, which was still relatively easy. Enemies are still around the same level as us, but that'll change soon once we reach Air 30. I used a bunch of my resin on condensed resin for artifact grinding. I wanted to get 2-piece Pale Flame and 2-piece Tenacity of the Millilith, but I didn't want to have them on my Kirara at the same time. I wanted Pale Flame for most fights because I'm still building off a physical attack, and I wanted Tenacity of the Millilith for potential future fights where we need to have a stronger shield. Something miraculous happened while grinding artifacts.
Crit damage. Dendro. 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 Dendro.
Dendro! Despite the fact that it got double crits, it's still not better. After a while, we're at Air 30 and we can start the Inazuma Prologue quest, which only had treasure hoarders and slimes. Something I neglected to mention is that Kirara struggles against cryo shields. Because Dendro does nothing with cryo, we just have to use our normal charge or plunge attacks on them to get rid of their shields. Either way, with that done, we can really start Inazuma, but I decided I would save that for another day, and I ended day 7 there. Day 8 started with me starting Act 1. The start of Act 1 is all dialogue, which is not interesting, so we'll skip to the first combat part of this quest, the transport mission.
We're delivering goods. We're delivering crystal meth.
These were more groups of fights that I thought were going to be harder than they were, but they weren't. Way later, we have to break somebody out of jail while fighting a bunch of Tenryou Commission soldiers. Something might have happened in the domain.
I will not use a healing item. I should have used a healing item.
But aside from that, it was easy. The thing that inflicts them with Electro was actually a hindrance for them because we could use Quicken and Spread on them when they were afflicted with Electro.
Get the fuck down. No, get the fuck down. Go fuck down. You...
Oh my god. Oh no, it's me. Okay. I need to get out of here. Oh my god, this place is haunted. That's the end of Act 1 and the end of Day 8. For Day 9, we need to complete Ayaka's and Yoimiya story quest to start Act 2. Both of these quests are boring, so we're gonna skip to Act 2.
A 4-star Kirara constellation? No!
At your
That's the
service,
blue
my
guy.
First in Act 2 is the Raiden Shogun. I didn't know at the time that you didn't have to fight her to finish the fight, but even still it was easy. After that I opened a random Shrine of Depths and something magical happened.
Dendro damage bonus. Oh my god!
It took until Inazuma Act 2 to get a 4-star Dendro damage bonus goblet, but it finally happened. Keep in mind that there was a pretty good chance that we didn't get this during an entire playthrough. Something I didn't mention in Singcho only is that I never got a 4-star Hydro damage bonus goblet, which I feel was one of the main reasons that challenge was more difficult than I thought it would be. But now, finally, we can build a Kirara the way she was meant to be. Back to the Archon quest, we save the Virgin from 2 Tenryou Commission soldiers and then go to the front lines to do the archery demonstration. She obviously couldn't do this, so we let Tainari do it instead. At the front lines we had to fight a few Tenryou Commission soldiers who were quick and easy to take out. Now time for Act 3. Act 3 starts with some Ronin, which are still pretty easy. Later we have to trigger 3 Electro Monuments to fight an Electro Lawtrol, but Kirara is not Electro, so we let Fischl trigger them. The combination of Bloom and Quicken I could use during this fight destroyed the Electro Lawtrol. Next is the Delusion Factory, which was the first domain to give us a run for our money. It did only take 10 minutes, but there were a bunch of tanky and strong enemies in this domain that were a little slow to take down, like the bane of my existence, the Electro Hammer guy. Pretty soon after, we meet Sayu. She's my second favorite character in the game. Best Inazuma character. Later we have to fight a bunch of Tenryou Commission soldiers, and because they were all grouped up, I could use my burst on them. Once again, it's the best part about our kit because it's really strong. Next is Signora. The fight in its entirety, including the cutscene, took 6.5 minutes, which is pretty slow. It wasn't the worst Signora fight by any means, but I did actually have to try, which is more than I could say for most fights in this playthrough so far. Lastly is the Raiden Shogun. The Raiden Shogun can't even beat her own people. What a loser. That's the end of Inazuma Act 3 and the end of Day 9.
I think this stream might be in contention for the video on my channel with the best thumbnail. Just look at it. It's amazing.
That thumbnail was accurate because today we're doing the Dainslift Chasm quest. The Black Serpent Knights were a little annoying because of how tanky they were, and most of the Abyss enemies were not that bad besides the Pyro Abyss Mage and Cryo Abyss Mage. But what's more important than the quest was this.
It worked. Look in the corner.
We also need to get to AR35, which I did by grinding more artifacts. Same set as before because this is the easiest domain for us to do. After a while of doing that, we're at AR35 and now we have to do the Ascension domain. I expected the time trial at the end to be a bigger problem than it was, but it only took 2 tries. The bad thing is though, the fight ended with only 18 seconds, so it's clear that our Kirara is falling behind. I decided to try the Iniquitous Baptist again, but it's still not happening. Once again, I still feel it's possible, but I'd rather not sit through it. Now it's time to start Sumeru. Sumeru Act 1 starts with us clearing out a withering zone. Because all the fungi were in water, we could use Bloom Rara once again.
We're pushing the birds!
Thank goodness we found you here.
Why
We were just about to head
why
back
aren't they
to
flying
Fontaine
out?
to
Okay,
what's
so this is a
going on.
cutscene with
just discovered
Lumine,
the withering
Amir,
zone.
Nasrin, Tainari, Paimon, and the Crane. Okay, got it.
The block's nearly the entire narrow
He's
part of the
yelling
valley
at
area.
Paimon.
May not have a vision, but she's
Okay,
a
goodbye.
Later in the Dream domain, we have to fight some Hilichurls. I think it's a bad sign that this fight took 3 minutes, but we're gonna ignore that for now. Soon after completing that domain, I ended day 10. Day 11 starts with us meeting Alhaitham at Port Ormos, and later we buy some knowledge capsules from Dory. We tested out one of them that we got on some fungi, which were easy. At the docks we had to fight some Eremites, which were 21 levels above Kirara, but they were still just Eremites, which were pretty easy. Next is Act 2, which is almost all dialogue except for a pretty easy Eremite fight. But in the early parts of Act 2 I decided to randomly fight Child. Yeah, we died. On to Act 3. We meet
The Doctor.
and in the forest we have to take on an Eremite brigade. It was another slow but not that hard fight. In the desert we fight some Rift Hounds which are tanky as hell. It felt like Sumeru was a turning point in the challenge where my damage just fell off a cliff even despite having decent artifacts. It was probably because every enemy that I fought out-leveled me by over 20 levels. If things are going bad in Sumeru, imagine how they're gonna go in Fontaine. Either way, we're moving on to Act 4. First were more Eremites, and they were also pretty easy and probably the fastest Eremite group so far. Then again, 2 minutes is still not that fast. At the Elazar Hospital, there were a bunch of Hilichurls and a Geolawachurl. This fight from start to finish took 5 minutes. Most of that time can be attributed to the Geolawachurl, who was probably the tankiest enemy I've fought so far. When it had its shield, we basically dealt no damage. The worst part about this fight was that afterwards, Paimon just rubbed salt in the wound. Easy.
easier to deal with than Paimon had expected.
Oh, fuck off, Paimon. For the Dendro pillars, I could actually trigger them normally for once. The King Deshret domain had a bunch of easy puzzles and a bunch of fungi. Luckily, I didn't have to fight all of them, but I did have to fight a few. The last room had 2 Hydro fungi and 2 Dendro fungi, and they almost killed me twice. This fight took just under 2 painful minutes, but once that's over, Act 4 is done. Lastly is Act 5. This act starts with more Eremites, and they were probably the easiest of all because we had helpers who deal over double our normal attacks. That's just sad. I want to take this time to say that a lot of you drew fan art for this challenge, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you. It was awesome to see so many of you so invested in the challenge that you wanted to draw art of it. Either way, at Party CI we have to fight some Fatui soldiers, and this went super slow. This was of course mostly due to the Electro Hammer guy, who we had to fight twice in a row. We have no reliable way of taking down his HP fast or stunning him, so we'll always get a shield. This sequence of fights took 15 minutes, and it was possibly the longest 15 minutes of my life. That's not where the Fatui misery ends, because later we have to go inside the Deus Foundry, which is overloaded with Fatui soldiers. Oh no, here we go, Deus Foundry, can't wait, I'm so excited. This domain is pretty much the Delusion Factory ranked up to 100. From the point that I took control of Kirara to the end of the domain, it took 23 minutes. I don't think that going into why this domain was difficult is necessary because it's all the same reasons as I've already said before. Elemental shields and strong enemies. Once I finally complete that, it's time for Scaramouche. Scaramouche compared to the Deus Foundry was a lot easier. Kirara could surprisingly take down the Nirvana engines in phase 2 and she almost dealt 10k to him. With that fight done, all that's left is the polluted part of Irminsul. First were the Rift Hounds, which almost took 3 minutes, but it would have taken longer if I didn't launch the small Rift Hounds off the platform. On the boat are a bunch of Hilichurls and Electro Lawachurl. This group of enemies was more difficult than every other boss in the game. The first group wasn't that bad, but I still died to them because I wanted to take out the Dendro Stamina Troll fast. And I died to the Electro Lava Troll 3 times. First time I died to him triggering overloaded, second time he ambushed me in the corner, and the third time, well... Are you fucking kidding me? After 9.5 agonizing minutes, we finally beat all of them. That's the end of Sumeru Act 5 and the end of Day 11. Now we need to get to Era 40 and complete Kirara to start Fontaine. Kirara for the most part was fine up until the Cryo Abyss Herald. Yeah, taking down his HP was slow like all enemies at this point, but the real trouble came when he got his Cryo Shield. As I've said multiple times throughout this video, Dendro does nothing with Cryo, so the best we could do was plunge attack. That will require him getting close to the stairs so I could actually perform the plunges, but that barely ever happened because he was always moving. This was one of the longest fights in the playthrough, taking 16 minutes. But what if I told you that this wasn't the longest fight, and the longest fight in this playthrough was 10 times worse than this? But we'll get into that later. The best thing to do after completing Kirara is using your commission keys on story quests. I did Klee's, Jean's, and Venti's story quest. That only just barely got us to AR39, so I had to use 1,760 resin to get the rest of the experience I needed. I of course used condensed resin because I'm not insane. It took about 50 minutes, which isn't too bad in the grand scheme of things. What is bad is that we are now world level 5. All Fontaine enemies will outlevel us by 31 levels, so we better prepare for some tough fights on day 13. At the start of Act 1 you have to collect Maritime flowers for Thing 1 and Thing 2, which you have to use Hydro on. But all you really need to do is grab a Hydreigon and rush over to them. The only bit of combat in this quest doesn't even let you use your own characters, so let's skip to Act 2. We investigate with Navia for a while before going into this underwater domain. Inside of here are a bunch of Gardemex. Normally this domain isn't that bad, but in this playthrough it's slow as hell. This domain from the starting point to the last enemy took almost 18 minutes. Something I decided to do in the middle of this domain was switch to an energy recharge sand so I can get more burst off. It's literally the only part of our kit that does any decent damage anymore. After we completed Act 2, I ended Day 13. Day 14 was the final day and it started with Act 3 and 4, which are the most boring Archon quests in the entire game. There are no instances of combat in either of these quests, so we're going to skip to Act 5, but before we do that, what do we think Kirara got in jail for? Maybe she was a porch pirate. The first domain of Act 5 is the Tower Domain. Of all the solo challenges I've done, I can say with confidence that this was the worst domain I've ever done. There's multiple things about this domain that are difficult. First are the rogues. They're pretty tanky and we deal pretty much no damage anymore. Even just to take down one on its own took 2.5 minutes. Second are the 3 Minotaurs. I'm gonna lock them out. They're locked out. I locked them out. They're gonna spawn back in here. I didn't know that, but that's so funny. There's a lot to focus on for this fight. Since there are 3 of them, oftentimes there's going to be one that's jumping towards you, while the other 2 are swinging their axes. Overall, it's not horrible, but it's pretty bad. But those previous 2 problems are nothing compared to the final room of this domain. The final room has 2 Hilichurl rogues and a Ruin Guard. I've been worrying about this fight ever since Sumeru, and once I got in there I quickly realized that all my worries were justified.
First problem is that we can't take hits at all. Second problem is that our shield is weak. Third problem is that all of them have projectiles. Fourth problem is that we deal no damage. Fifth problem is that they all have a lot of health. Sixth problem is that this area is really small. Seventh problem is that when you try to attack one of them, the other 2 will attack you, so you pretty much have to play a hit and run style for the entire fight. Eighth problem is that when the Ruin Guard uses his missiles, I have to use the iframes from my burst to dodge it because of how small the room is. And the ninth problem is that if I feel I can't do this and I leave to try and grind something, I have to redo the entire domain. Keep in mind that the domain so far has taken 25 minutes, so I'd rather not do that again. I genuinely felt like I couldn't do this. There were too many variables at play for me to feasibly beat all of them when I was so underleveled. I felt like this might be where the challenge ended. I hate this character.
She's also one of my least favorite characters.
Can I say that Kirara is the worst Dendro character to exist? I don't know of any worse ones. Does it look like a fucking package? I'm already not a fan of her normal attacks. I don't think I can do this.
One down! One down!
One down. Oh my god, that's huge. Two down, okay. I think we pretty much already won.
Third try. That was probably the most nerve-wracking 18 minutes of my life. Later in the Archon quest, we put Farina on trial for not being the real Archon, which she was guilty of. This leads to Farina and Focalor plot, but before that we have to fight 2 more Gardamex. Yeah, the fights combined took 6 minutes, but I'm just glad it didn't take 18.
I read that as a silliness without ends.
Now it's time for the all-devouring Narwhal, which is never difficult. In the Archon quest, all you have to do is wait for him to eat you and then take down the Shadow Phase's shield.
Oh. I died.
You saw nothing. We completed that fight, and that's the end of Fontaine Act 5, meaning that we beat Genshin Impact using only Kirara. But more importantly, we delivered Nivelette's hoodie. I did not expect that challenge to get as hard as it got. For about half of the playthrough, it was a normal solo challenge. Once Inazuma and Sumeru started, I knew this challenge would get a lot harder, and I was not prepared for how difficult Fontaine would be. Even despite having pretty decent artifacts for this point in the game and having a shield, it didn't matter when enemies outleveled us by 31 levels at the end. This is 100% my hardest solo challenge, even harder than Hazo only. On the tier list of difficulty, I'm putting this at the bottom of hard, and on the solo tier list, she's at the first alright. Her main saving grace is her shield. If it weren't for that, this challenge would have probably been higher up. My next challenge will be another difficult one. No building characters. That means I can't give them artifacts, must keep their 1-star weapons at level 1, and can't level their talents. The only things I can do to the characters that I get on that account are level them and ascend them. Until then, I'll leave you with that.